Good evening, everyone. It is 6:40 something, and we'll call we'll call the meeting to order of the June 13th Cedar Springs Public Schools School Board meeting. And if everyone would join me for the pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Secretary Slager, if we can have a roll call, please, and then we'll note for the record that Vice President Schaffner is an excused absence.
Trustee Bowser. Here. Trustee Rivard.
Here.
Trustee Vanderhyde.
Here.
Treasurer Gilmore.
Here.
Secretary Slager. Here. Vice President Schaffner, absent as noted, and President Reed.
Here. Thank you, and we have established a quorum for this evening's meeting. And that brings us to the adoption of the agenda. And usually it's as presented, but we had a little technical issue we were fixing beforehand. So for the adoption of the agenda, I'm entertaining a motion for as presented, except we're adding discussion item H, which is the 98B end of year data. That will also be on for action. It needs to be approved in this school year. And it's data, it's not going to change.
So moved.
Support.
Any other discussion? Having none, Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed, yes. The agenda is approved as presented with the change. That brings us to gratitudes. And I'm grateful for all the construction around the district, but holy cow. Watch where you're driving or not driving, or which way you're going. There you have it. That's my gratitude.
I'm thankful for all the hard work that went into graduation, that we were able to do a commencement ceremony that was in person and went so well. So thanks to Ron and the whole staff that worked so hard to put that on and make that special for our graduating seniors.
No, I was just gonna say, I'm glad school is out. I'm grateful school is out. I don't have to drive my kids all kinds of different places and bring them their missing lunchbox or whatever they forget, so.
And I'm grateful for this team over here as school has come to an end and you led us and guided us through another school year that was very challenging and put us in a position that I think would be envied by most districts, according to the people I talked to around the area. So congratulations and thank you.
I just want to thank the rest of the teachers and staff as well, just the hard work that they put in for the year and just being able to finish well, and just all the communication that needed to happen at the end of the year, just all of those closing festivities. So just really appreciate the hard work of the team.
I'll echo everything you guys said. You pretty much touched all of it. So yeah, it was just a fantastic end to the year. It really was.
Yeah, the team that Vic leads, our maintenance team, and Russell's work. We have some students who are working with us this summer, both in facilities and maintenance, but also in technology. It's really been an all hands on deck 11 days. It's hard to believe that it's only been 11 days since students departed on the 3rd, but yeah, it's just been a remarkable effort. And it was fun to watch. Russell sent out an email to the Triangle team just thanking them for their efforts and their cooperation, and in all the 3 principal superintendents from for the high school project, the Red Hawk project, the View project, all were just very complimentary of the work and the cooperation and the team effort that our staff have been displaying. It's really helping us stay, 1 or 2 steps ahead of the contractors. And that's just helping the momentum of the projects stay in a positive direction. So we're on track. But it's early. Early in the game. Yeah, we're excited.
All right. Thank you. All right, so moving on to consent items, I would entertain a motion for as presented.
So move.
Support.
Question.
Yeah.
Does that still include the 6G end of year data for 98?
No, I'll amend that. I'll entertain a motion for as presented, taking out the 6G, because we moved it to discussion.
So move.
Okay.
Support.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed, yes, consent items are approved as presented. And that brings us to discussion items, and we have first, multi-tiered systems of supports, also known as MTSS, data review with Mr. Steve Johnson.
I think we switched it up a little bit.
Yeah. We were worried about taking your evening.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Thank you. And, very low tech. So, thank you, everyone. Here for our spring MTSS, spring 2022 MTSS update. I have whittled my content down to 3 celebrations and accomplishments that we want to kind of lift up from this school year, and 4 action steps that we are planning for next year. And so the first celebration, kind of focusing on the elementary level, the last 2 years and beyond, we have spent a lot of time and effort and energy in really strengthening our reading practices, reading instruction, reading resources that we're using. And we are starting to see in the first year of using our new resource, some really positive momentum and positive outcomes. So I kind of want to point out some data from Cedar View in particular. We had, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, an 11% increase in students who were reading proficient or at grade level. So that's roughly 45 students, almost 2 classrooms of students who in August were at risk for reading difficulty, and in May are at grade level where we want them to be. And so that is one example of some of the positives at the K-5. Thinking about the secondary level, this year we had a significant increase in office discipline referrals. Now that's not a celebration in and of itself, but it is not surprising considering we have a significant increase in students who are learning in person versus virtual. It's kind of challenging to get suspended when you're learning from home. So, but even with that significant increase in office referrals, we actually had a decrease in the percentage of students who were suspended or expelled. And so I think that leads or kind of speaks to our positive school climate work at the secondary level. It speaks to the restorative practices that we're implementing at the secondary level. So I think that's definitely a celebration too. We have more students who are here learning in person versus mixed. So, and that's not only a drop from last year to this year, there was also a drop from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So we kind of taper down even as we move. So that's certainly a celebration too. From the district level, we have made some tweaks to scheduling, working with the Kent ISD. They've been very flexible in terms of meeting us where we need to be in order to increase the amount of time that staff are in buildings actually working with kids versus away from the buildings in trainings and planning meetings and reviewing. The training and the planning is all very important, but it's also very important for the staff to be in the buildings doing the work. And so we have switched some things around at the district level to help make that happen a little bit more effectively and reduce the need for guest teachers in our buildings. So got some very positive feedback from staff members, from building leaders about that change. So I think that's definitely something to celebrate and look at as an accomplishment.
And that's also something we're going to continue moving forward, even though the sub-teacher shortage isn't quite as severe as it has been previously. So, next steps, our next school year, we have a lot more. Just going to talk about a few things. Talked about the last few years have really been spent at the elementary level, firming up our reading instruction. We're now shifting that up to the middle level into the high school. So really doing some work in how we can help students utilize those reading strategies across their curriculum, whether not just in English, whether it's a science, social studies, even math courses, we can still embed reading strategies into that content so that students are better able to understand what's being put through. So that's one step for next year. We're also incorporating some social emotional learning resources for all students, utilizing a resource that we have available to us. That's something that I think is really exciting and will really have a good impact with all kids, not just those students who may need the social emotional support. Strengthening our intervention systems, K-5. So really making those systems more efficient, more equitable for students so that all students who need additional support have access to that additional support, both in reading and behavior, social emotional learning, and also in math. We've added some math components to our intervention system. And finally, speaking of math, we are moving forward with some MTSS structures for math also. The last few years, it's primarily been spent reading and behavior, kind of getting those things, those foundations really built well. And now we're shifting some of our focus to math, which is basically going to be a Cedar Springs creation. There's no other district in Kent County that I know of that is moving in this direction. There's no targeted support from the Kent ISD or from MDE that I know of. We are really building from what we have done with reading and behavior and shifting that to math with those systems and those structures. So, and that will be a lot of work, but it's exciting and it's a neat place. And so, those are some of the steps that we'll be taking next year. I am really, really excited. I'm so thankful to be able to serve in this role and help support not just students at the building level, but also some of the district level decisions too. Definitely want to thank the board for your support over the past few years. Thank everyone sitting along this side of the room for their support. This work cannot get done without strong leaders, and I thank you all for that. And I also thank the individuals in the buildings doing the work every day. Can't do it enough. I wish some of them were here to acknowledge them, and that's insane. I am actually going to end it with just I'm not one for inspirational quotes, but this one came through my email inbox just this week, and I felt it was pretty appropriate. So this is the Greek writer Hesiod. You've never heard of him? Had to Google how to pronounce his name. But he wrote that if you add just a little to a little and do this often, soon that little will become great. And I feel like that sums up what we've been doing for the past 5 years through our MTSS work. Sometimes it feels like doing something well takes forever. I know I don't move as quickly as Jen and Stacy would like in something, but before you know it, 5 years have passed, and we have some really, really solid things in place that are going to help us with that. So, I'll open it up for questions.
Questions or thoughts from the board?
First of all, congratulations on all the things you brought to us tonight. One thing I wanted to ask you about was the Cedar View reading data. You said 11% more students are reading at proficiency. My question is, so I'm going to make an assumption, maybe I shouldn't, but that was probably the 11% that were closest to being there already?
Potentially,
We-
yeah.
we might be able to say
It's a-
that.
It's a very deep data dive to really.
To figure that out, right. So my question is, do you sense year over year, next year, that another 11% in that same group could be there? Or is this kind of the low hanging fruit? Now there's a lot more to do here.
11% is a very ambitious goal.
Okay.
That was, I think, at least 2 or 3 years of school improvement goals.
Okay,
So we kind
good.
of, you know, we separated out to like 4 or 5% a year, I think.
Okay.
And so 11% represents about 2 years worth of growth.
Right.
So to expect that every year is a little lofty, but
Sure it is.
that's what we would like.
Okay.
We would like to see that every year.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's exciting. That's great stuff.
And-
Two classrooms is what you said, basically, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
tremendous.
Yeah, and with the intervention systems at the building, even those students who are a little bit farther behind will have a better chance to get to that point where they don't need support.
Very good. Thank you.
I had kind of a specific question, and if you can't answer it now, it's okay. I just was curious when you were talking about the equitable supports with intervention, in particularly in math. Can you give an example of maybe how it wasn't as easily accessible before, but now it is?
Sure. One of the barriers previously was simply having the tools to even provide intervention. So that's something that we've really been working on to beef up what is available to us. Having interventionists that are trained to use the programs is obviously very important. And so those are the things that we've been putting into place. As we move into next year, we talk about intervention systems, we start to talk about specific criteria for entering an intervention, exiting an intervention. When do we know that students have gotten it and don't need the support anymore? So there have been some barriers in the past, just even with staffing, even with having interventionists available for students, that we're really working hard to get the right people in those roles to help move those students.
Thank you.
So does the interventionist come in the classroom, or what does that timeline look like? Do the students go out of the classroom, or how do we say, you know, Johnny needs help? So
Yeah.
what happens then?
It varies depending on the age level, depending on the skill that the student is working on. You know, we certainly don't want students being pulled from direct instruction. So if we pull a student out of reading instruction to give them reading intervention, and they're missing the reading instruction, then now you have to fill that gap. So the building principals and our reading champion, math champion, Jen, are working very diligently to create those schedules so that there are dedicated times for interventionists to meet with students. And so we certainly don't want those times to overlap with the instruction that all students get. So it really, I don't know that I have a great answer, but it really varies.
Yeah. That's good. Thank you.
I have one more. So when you implement the Steve Johnson math, MTSS, how do you know? I mean, data, you know if you're being successful, but you know, it takes a large amount of data to justify or verify success.
Yes.
So you won't know in a semester or a year. You can make some assumptions in a semester or a year.
Correct.
So at what point do you realize, hey, we're on the right track, or we gotta make some change? I'm sure you've thought through this thoroughly.
Yeah, I think that's just an ongoing process. That's part of the data review cycles. And so, for example, with reading and behavior, we meet 3 times a year to review our data to make sure that we are going in the right direction. And so if you have data, but don't really utilize it or do anything with it, then there's no point in collecting the data. So that will be, that's our plan, is to incorporate some of those data review cycles for math, just like we do for reading and behavior. And when you're meeting that frequently 3 times a year, it really gives us a good sense of
what we need to do to make things better. So, how quickly that will move, or how quickly we'll see progress with that, it's tough to say, but that would be built into our MTSS system, that ongoing reviewing the data and then making decisions based on the data. It's just interesting that nobody's doing it math. You're gonna do it math, so what are you bouncing it off of to find out what?
And
where you're headed?
really, it's the structures
Right.
that will be similar for math as they are for reading and behavior. So we talk about the team structures at the building level, having data to tell you if we're going in the right direction or not, just those review cycles and decision-making processing. It really is an opportunity to not just work harder, but work smarter. Even small changes, even if it's 3 students, that has a significant impact on the classroom environment. I mean, if there's a significant amount of ripple effect that small incremental changes can make. You know, Steve's point was, it's that you get 1% better every day, over time, and that becomes significant.
Thank you for updating us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sounds wonderful. Alrighty. We will move forward then to discussion item B, the middle level handbook revisions. We
So-
don't have Mr. Cataldo.
No.
But I bet someone's gonna.
Mr.
sub for him.
Cataldo is home. I was gonna step in. We uploaded the red line version, so you can see the proposed changes. This was something that was discussed presented at our last meeting. If there are any significant changes, this isn't something that we have to vote on. I'm sorry, if there are any significant questions, this is not something that we have to vote on tonight. But if there are questions, I think we could probably speak to the majority of them if there are any questions or concerns.
I thought it was pretty straightforward.
I don't have any problem with the changes per se, but I still wish they would revisit the dress code. I still don't like that.
No questions? Thank you. All right, discussion item C, construction update with Scott Smith presenting.
Sure. So I shared a little bit of the update just in terms of how we're moving forward smoothly on the moving out of items and clearing the spaces that are going to be renovated. So that really, the bulk of that work is done. So we've cleared out of spaces now. So really the contractors have taken over the site. So what you'll be seeing coming forward in the next few weeks, they're making remarkable progress down below. There are just a lot of external things that are easy to see. So the parking lot areas, the curbing, you'll start to see some additional cement work coming in. Paving will start very shortly. You'll notice if you run the risk of taking your vehicle down behind Red Hawk, the two pole buildings are gone that once upon a time was an FFA structure. The other one was an ag science structure. The other one was maybe at one point in time a little retail location for one of our programs. So the retail location will not be rebuilt, but the ag science building will be constructed after we get through the heat of the, no pun intended, the summer construction. Then we're going to jump on that and utilize some contractors that are free and have a little bit of time in the fall to jump on that project. So that's going to be coming in the near future. We're really now starting to enter into some wrap-up phases on some of the work that you had the opportunity to see a couple of weeks ago at the high school. And so, we're going to be able to start, they're going to be doing the completing finishing program projects and really have those spaces be finished. And then it's going to be hopscotch, classroom to classroom, as we move through the building and continues to make progress on replacing the unit ventilators, floor coverings, doing the polished concrete in the science classrooms. So they're really going to be knee deep in it at the high school. The new additions, the classroom additions are really in that process now where they're starting to do the finishes. The additions and the modifications around the cafeteria, you know, those I believe are all sealed from a weather perspective. They got windows in. That's all ready and clarified. And then, you know, the project over at Cedar View is well underway. So we've got the demolition going on in 3 of the classrooms, which will then create space for a classroom rebuild, the new secure office, which is going to be an important addition in light of just what's happened in our country. And that safety and security piece is really important, as it should be for our families and for our district. And then the new art space and the new music space are underway as well. So we're really making good progress. We have the materials that we need, so we shouldn't run into any hiccups as far as supply chain issues go. So it's now just a prayer that we have good weather and that our crews stay healthy and are able to continue to make progress. We haven't had any lost time accidents. It's really been a successful season so far.
Questions?
I do have a question about the signs, because everybody's asking me. So I saw so they are moving the one that said Cedar View. So is there gonna be one that says Cedar Trail? Like what is,
Yes.
okay. Then that Cedar View one, is that gonna go in front of Cedar View?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So everybody's asking, I'm like, I don't know, I gotta look at my binder. So I just wasn't sure. Okay.
Yeah.
They look wonderful. I think they're fantastic. It's about time. Yeah.
It's already in front of you.
Oh, it is?
Yep.
Okay. Yay. I think they look great.
You'd be surprised at people that notice that comment a lot.
The
Uh-huh.
Cedar View sign or
Well,
the new
They're
signs in
noticing,
general?
well, they're noticing, the middle school, that when it was construction on it, you know how you are not from Rockford, I know, but it's construction, it's okay. I mean, so they really do pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's what it says.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question.
I think it's a big accomplishment. We have the material, because I know their material shortages are real. So I think the pre-planning that went into that and making sure that we got our orders in early really is paying off now. So that's great news.
It's fun to, there are 2 semi-trailers down below. Those are filled with unit ventilators. There are trailers behind View that have unit ventilators in them. So we have these mobile warehouses in several locations around campus to help make sure that we can keep making progress, which is a good thing.
And I did want to say too, thank you. Like, I appreciate you being proactive in regards to security. Like, I know quite a few people have said that, asked me about it and just said that it's nice that we're being proactive and not reactive. And then I am going to work with Tommy Brand when he finally gets elected in November, but then there's some legislation going forward and getting federal money for secure entrances for schools, but we're already ahead of the game. But still, I'm going to work on it.
But those dollars can go to cameras. They can go
Yes.
to, there are other things that we could use those dollars for.
Mhm.
So if they provide it, we'll utilize it to make our spaces safer.
Should.
Thank you. Alrighty. And the item that we've all been waiting for, the budget hearing, all final 21-22 and the initial 22-23 budget with Marty Sullivan presenting.
Just for the record, I do look forward to this.
We do. Yes.
I didn't want to ignore you though.
I'm already cross-eyed.
I will try to balance a happy medium for Jeff and everyone else.
And it's much better than having to make the hard decisions when the funds were leaner, and so give you a little more joy.
Yeah.
I think I'll probably skip over the general fund as of May 31st, since we'll be covering the final budgets. But I'll pull up real quick the bond budget spreadsheet that presents both the cash balance, cash actual, and down here, the accrual basis with pending payments coming that will be paying this month. The accrual basis, we expended $11.2 million on our bond projects. Actual cash that we paid out to date, $11 million. I'm looking at that. There's obviously a formula error there, but actual here, $11 million is what we have paid out to date. At the 1.7 million pending, and we're paid the May pay application. All right, so diving into the 2021-22 final budget presentation. So our blended enrollment for the 21-22 school year ended up at 33,329 FTEs for our state aid enrollment. That is down 48 FTEs from the previous school year. At $8,700 per pupil, that equates to a loss of $417,600 towards the general fund. So a pretty significant decrease in state aid revenue due to that decline in enrollment that we lost from the 2021 school year to the 21-22 school year. I left this slide up to show the difference between the super blend and the traditional state aid formula. You know, in 2020-21, that super blend really did save the district a significant financial hit. Had it been the traditional 90-10 rate or ratio, you would have been down 160 students or pupils for our state aid. With the super blend, we came in at 35-37. Let's see if this still works. So here you can see just the line graph of the state aid foundation allowance over the past several years. Right now, we're currently, as I mentioned, 8,700. That was an increase of 589 over the previous year. So what has changed since the January amendments? Well, right now I'm projecting an increase in total revenues of just under $1.3 million. Based on the 4 categories that we budget for: the local revenue, state revenue, federal revenue, and then other transfers in. 266,000 of that increase relates to insurance reimbursements. So we had the wind damage here as well as the hospital. So that was not, obviously you don't budget for insurance losses, but that's also an in and out. You know, we get the reimbursement, we pay the contractors to fix the roofs. With the increased cost in fuels, we are increasing our fuel reimbursements by $37,000. That is Dean Transportation for the special ed transportation. They use our gas, fill their buses. We then invoice them and they pay us for that usage. So I'm projecting that we will increase our fuel reimbursement by $37,000. And then also just $11,000 increase in athletic participation fees. For state aid, we had $256,000 related to 31O, section 31O. That's the state grant for the social workers, counselors, school sites, nurses. 31N also relates to that social emotional well-being. And then also section 35A, the early lit grant, we are recognizing that revenue. Section 31A at risk is down $326,000. Now that's kind of deceiving because that money is still available to us, but we're just not utilizing it this year. We're going to defer it into next year. Part of that is we shifted some costs between 31A and ESSER funds. So it's kind of moving it out because we're not charging it to that state categorical. We're not recognizing that revenue. We'll recognize it next year. And then collectively, the remaining categoricals were up $257,000. Large part of that being the 147. I want to say A, but related to the UAAL, they increased that. Again, that's an in and out as well. That increase, we're receiving those funds from the state and then paying it back to the state into the retirement system. Federal revenues, that's the largest increase. We are recognizing an additional $627,000 of ESSER related funds. $96,000 additional section 23B, which is the summer school funding that we received. And then the health resource advocate grants, $61,000. Some decreases in federal revenue, Title I, Title 1A, the IDEA, we're collectively down $241,000. The IDEA, I believe, when Chris put together the amendment, we did not know, the ISD had not allocated the ARP IDEA funds to the districts yet, so that was his best guess at the time. It ended up coming in about half of what he projected back in January. The Title II, again, those funds aren't going away. They're just referring them to next year. And that's about $180,000 that will be deferring to next year. Any questions so far? Good.
Why are they deferred till next year? Because we didn't use them?
Because, so with grants and certain state categoricals, it's a one-to-one match. So if you are allocated $1 million, but you only spend $800,000, you're only going to recognize $800,000 of revenue. But you still have that $200,000 that can carry over to next year, and you'll spend it next year.
Thank you.
Is this the last year? Oh, sorry, Jeff.
The fuel reimbursement, I just want to talk briefly about that. It's a revenue category, but is it a net zero? Because we have to pay for the gas somewhere along the way.
You do have to pay for the gas, yes.
So we don't see that, but we call it an increase in revenue. It's also an increase in expenses on
Yes.
the other side. Okay.
Yep.
This will be the last year we can do the super blend, right? After this year, we think it's going to go back to normal, or is it going to remain?
No, this year was back to the traditional 90-10.
Okay, so it's just last
So
year.
it was just that 1 year that they did the super blend, which really saved us.
Yeah. And then the other question was the health resource advocate grant.
Mhm.
Does that really just offset the expense that we have for like a school nurse, or is this an additional resource that we're going to be?
I believe we added the two
Yeah, so it was offset the costs related to basically for COVID response. So we use those dollars to pay for our health aides that we have in the buildings that help do the contact tracing and that type of thing. But since the revenues are still in place, we're gonna fold those dollars in, expand our school nurse programming. Stacy's been working hard on developing a model that helps provide the right level of support. If you speak to healthcare agencies, they would like a nurse in every classroom. And that would be ideal, but we don't live in an ideal world. And so we'll utilize those dollars to continue to offset costs for the provision of medical service health, but also for mental health and social emotional health as the opportunity presents itself.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
This next slide just kind of breaks down the difference between January and the final, as far as where we're spending the money, or I'm sorry, where the money is coming from. You know, very similar to what we had in January. The federal portion of our revenue is up slightly, 1.32%, while state is down 1.55. Again, part of that being we've shifted some of what we were planning on spending 31A into ESSER. It's a shift. All right, moving on to the expense side of it. Right now, we're projecting increased expenses of almost $775,000 compared to January. And we'll go through kind of each budget category and take a little bit closer look at what makes up that increase. So this chart just shows you where we're spending the money. As usual, the largest part of our budget is personnel costs. So just about 71% salary and benefits. That equates to out of a $43.5 million budget, that equals $30.85 million of our expenditures. So obviously we're we're a people business. We need people to serve our mission. So. And then of the budget categories, basic programs is by far the largest area that we spend our funds, almost 48%. So this is just the traditional teachers in classrooms, general education. So that increased slightly by $224,000. Primarily some changes to the wages and benefits. Obviously, we had some sub costs that we incurred throughout the school year. That's always somewhat hard to predict, much harder during a pandemic. Big part of that change was an increase to the Cedar View. We purchased Cedar View furniture, so that's $205,000. Collectively, we're paying $188,000 less for high school, college tuition and payments to other schools. I believe last year we utilized Michigan Virtual heavily, whereas this year we shifted to My School at Kent. So we're paying a lot more for My School at Kent, but paying less than we did for Michigan Virtual. And then also included in the basic program is $76,000 increase to that summer school programming, which was funded by the Section 23B. So added needs, that's special education and intervention. So that decreased, just over $5,000. there's not much of a change there. We'll be paying out a little bit less for our tuition to the regional programs, special ed programs in Region 1. So those are the programs run by, we run our special regional programs. Sparta has some, Rockford, Comstock Parks, so that's the tuition that we pay to those other Region 1 districts. We did have a large increase in the high school furniture we purchased in ESSER 2 and 3 funds that landed in this budget line.
Can I ask a question at this point?
Yes.
So high school furniture in the added needs line, and it identifies ESSER 2 and 3 funds, created income to the expense account? Is that, I'm not, I don't,
That's
Because we
the
bought-
plus is a add.
okay, so is
Yes.
that much more than we had budgeted?
Yeah.
But we also bought furniture for Cedar View. Was that also with ESSER money, or is that not? I don't think you were involved in the actual purchasing. And I know it's just a money we're moving
Right.
around, but did we buy that out of the general fund, or was that out of ESSER
I
money?
want to say that was ESSER,
That's what I thought too. Let me, can I go back and look real
Yeah,
quick? and then-
sure.
and I would have to pick Chris's brain as to why we charged part of it to basic programming. and
understand
the
that,
other to-
I guess I don't know what added needs, you've indicated special ed and interventionists,
Yes,
but we've qualified all high school furniture purchase under the added.
that's compensatory education.
Can you describe what that means?
Stacy might be better.
So compensatory education, when it comes to special education, students with IEPs, that means that there was a section in time that we didn't meet their IEP goals, objectives, or minutes, and we need to make up for it later. So it might have been where a speech and language pathologist was on maternity leave, for instance. So we have to make up the time that was missed by that student through compensatory education later.
Okay. And then that justifies us, and I don't know who I'm asking at this point, justifies us including high school expenses.
I'd have to look at each piece to be able to answer that accurately. don't wanna
I just want to make sure we're doing it properly. That's what it comes down to. So, continue, Scott's looking up some stuff.
All right, our next category is pupil support. So that's our counselors, occupational therapists, school psychs, social workers, some non-instructional staff. That actually decreased by $28,000. Our guidance wages went down slightly. Slight decrease to health service wages, as well as school psychs. And then we did add 12.5K to purchase services to Spectrum Health. I believe that was, we were intended to hire people. Those are top positions to hire, so we brought on Spectrum. Instructional staff services, that increased $445,000. Primarily, that is the purchase of the K-12 math curriculum that was approved in April. General administration, slight decrease. So this is superintendent and board of ed. We just had some unspent budget categories within this line. School administration had a slight increase. Again, I mentioned the increase to the section 147 related to the UAAL. That in turn drives up benefits across the district. So that was partially what drove this increase. Business services increased about $17,000. Just a little bit for salary and benefits. The business office, we recently traveled to Indianapolis for a Tyler Connect conference. That's our financial system software to try to have some PD regarding how to better utilize our existing software. And then we'll be going through an upgrade in the fall. So then we also enrolled in this, what's called the PACE program that Tyler puts on. They will meet with us 6 times throughout the next year to help understand how we're currently using our system and then kind of help us implement some new processes and procedures that we can better utilize what we currently have. And the ISD will actually pay for half of that. So I'm recognizing the full cost of it, but we'll get half of it back from the ISD.
Can I add quickly to that? While the business services shows an increase in the budget this year, we also have to remember that we pulled several elements of service back from the ISD 2 years ago. So we're actually still saving significant money over what we were spending, but we did know that there was going to be a little bit of adjustment as we kind of found that sweet spot between tasks and staffing, but bringing it in-house is still a better value for us in comparison to cost, having outside vendors provide those services.
Operation maintenance saw an increase of $159,000. We had somewhat of an increase for salary and benefits. A large part of this is projected increase to energy costs, natural gas and electric. We came under budget on our supplies by about $74,000, and then we had some capital outlay increased. Transportation services. So this is essentially deemed transportation and the ISD. Right now, we're showing a decrease of $56,000, almost 57. A little bit of increase for salary and benefits. I think I've mentioned before, what we're anticipate paying Dean for services is less than what was originally budgeted due to the school closures that we had. But offsetting that, $140,000 increase to our fuel costs. Everybody knows. But we also anticipating $130,000 less that will pay the Kent ISD for special ed transportation. So Kent ISD holds the Dean contract for the special ed transportation in the county, and then they service our students and invoice us. So we have less special ed ridership than originally anticipated, and that was kind of hard to budget because they're servicing the entire county. What happens at one school or what happens at multiple schools impacts our district and the number of miles that our students are on that bus and what percentage of the Dean invoice that we end up paying. Central support services increased $35,000, $25,000 for salary, benefits, and supplies. A large part of that increase relates to this year we transitioned from Kent ISD providing our IT services to we brought that in-house, and now our IT department is Cedar Springs employees. So obviously we added some costs there, but we also are reducing some costs because we've paid the ISD less than originally anticipated. Athletics had a slight decrease. The primary driver is the $32,000 per purchase services, but salary and benefits and supplies were both up a little bit. So almost $2.4 million is what we anticipate expending for ESSER-related funds. Primarily, and that's a change of almost $600,000 from budget amendment 1. So we've implemented some of those ESSER plans between then and now. So primarily, we're paying salary and benefits, purchasing curriculum, furniture, Chromebooks, and then offering the summer school. Would be the main buckets of what we're spending those funds on. So you add it all up, right now I'm projecting we will increase fund balance by $573,743. Bringing us to, it actually will bring our fund balance percentage down just a little bit to 26.21%. You notice that $573,000, if we did not have that ESSER money, we'd be in the red, right? Any questions at this time before I move on to the other funds?
I do have a response to Jeff's question. So on October 25, Chris presented the plan to purchase 5 classrooms up to $40,000 using general fund dollars, an additional 19 classrooms using up to $185,000 of ESSER funds to completely refurnish the entire building. And then on November 8th, we passed, or the board passed, the resolution to make those purchases as proposed. So there was a portion out of the general fund purchase, portion of ESSER funds.
And I can follow up with Chris to see why it was charged to compensatory ed.
Yeah, if you would, I'd appreciate that.
And
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'd like to know why we made that decision.
all right, moving on to the next, our other funds. First one being community services, so preschool and campus kids. Real quick revenue highlights. Preschool is actually exceeded our pre-pandemic levels at this point. Where campus kids is still down about 25% from pre-pandemic levels. But we did receive $188,000 of child care relief grant that kept us from running in a deficit. Staffing expenses did increase by $48,000. Part of that being related to that child care relief grant. One of the stipulations for receiving those funds is you have to pay out bonuses to full-time and part-time employees. So in order to get those funds, we had to pay those bonuses per the grant. So all in all, right now, we're projecting fund balance to increase from $44,000 up to $169,000, leaving our fund balance percentage at 38.56%. Food service. Right now, we had our revenues increased by $481,000, while we saw expenses increase by $493,000. This will, and we'll cover this on the 22-23 budget, but this is the last school year that the USDA is doing the 100% free, universal free meals. So that program most definitely impacted food service revenues and participation. So right now, I'm projecting to add $251,000 to food services fund balance, leaving us at a 36.66% fund balance percentage. We do have, that is a robust fund balance, and we are in excess of the excess fund balance that the state allows us to carry. So we will have to do some planning on how to spend that down. But that might be addressed next year, depending on what the federal government does as far as reimbursement rates, participation levels, number of free and reduced kids that we have. So, but we'll cover that later.
I have a question, and maybe it's going to be addressed later, but if we wanted to continue with the free lunches, regardless of what they say, would that help at all here? Like, because I'm very much pro free lunches for all the kids. Maybe we don't do breakfast too. I don't know, but
Well, yeah, it would definitely help us spend down that excess fund balance for sure. But I don't know if it would be sustainable. It might, and I'd have to take a look at that, work through that with Holly.
if you could look into that for me, I'd appreciate that.
The state doesn't require you to use that, spend down money on anything specific. You can use it as long as it's related to food service. We know that for sure.
Yes, there are restrictions on what you can and cannot use those funds for.
And you believe provide meals would be something you could use it for?
I have to look at that. You can do some certain capital
Sure, we've done that in the past.
Yeah.
Right.
purchase food service van for certain equipment. You can use it for salary and benefits.
But provide meals is a great idea if it's approved by the state.
I would have to look back at the guidance on that. for you. But food service is going to be a big change next year, and there's a lot of unknowns. The student activity fund balance, this essentially is it's not essentially, this is the old student activities fund 61 that is now the school activities fund 29. It's basically our various programs and organizations raise money, that's our revenue, and then they spend the money, that's the expenditures. We have a very robust, again, fund balance for a district, and it's very typical for a school district this size. Right now, we're projecting to add $52,000 to fund balance, bringing our total fund balance to $282,000 at June 30th. All right, debt funds. Yeah, I left Chris's note that's a lot of funds. It is. We have a lot, and we'll be dropping one this year and adding one next year, so stay the same. Actually, we'll add 2 next year. So the debt funds are essentially, this is what we levy the 7 mills for our debt services on, based on our debt service schedule. That's how we allocate the tax collections that come in, that determines which funds we recognize the revenue in. If funds, tax collections do not meet our debt service requirements, then we are participating in the school bond loan fund. So the state will loan us the funds to meet our debt service requirements. We are currently in payback. We're paying back the state for our debt service. But, well, it's not in the 22-23 budget. But next year, I anticipate we will have to issue the Series 2 construction school building and site bonds. That will then put us back into borrowing. So currently, we're not in, but we will be going back. So for the 2021, or I'm sorry, 2012 refunding, I anticipate the ending fund balance to be $26,000. So a slight decrease from prior year. For our 2016A refunding bonds, we'll add $735, bringing fund balance to $4,000, just over $4,000. For the 2016B refunding, this is the one that we paid off this year. So we have revenues of just under $3,000, bringing our fund balance to $55,000. We will reallocate that to the remaining debt service funds. And then next year that will be zeroed out. 2017 added just a little, $350, bringing fund balance up to just over, let's say, $5,300. 2018, we ran a deficit of $13,225, bringing our total fund balance down to $9,157. Our 2019 refunding debt service, we are adding $383, bringing fund balance up to $3,041. All right, and I believe this is two more. So for the 2021 refunding, we ran a deficit of $3,529. Bringing fund balance down to $2,658. Then here's our final one for the 2021 bond, Series 1 school bond, school building and site bonds. We ran a surplus of $19,418, and that is our year-end fund balance. All right, so last two funds, sinking fund and the 2001 school building and site fund. So sinking fund, this was 2021 tax year was the last year that we are levying the sinking fund millage. We did not, was not renewed. So currently, our revenues increased slightly by $6,000. Expenditures were less than what was originally budgeted by $218,000. So we project adding $550,000 to the sinking fund fund balance, bringing the total to $1.9 million. So this year we did spend money on is pole pit, the new district signage came out of the sinking fund. And then we did, some field work on the softball and baseball fields. Any questions?
We can continue to use the sinking fund until that fund balance is depleted.
Correct.
And then once that happens, we have to use general fund dollars to do any of these type of sinking fund
General
programs.
fund or bond dollars to do projects, if they're on the.
If they're on the bond
They wouldn't
description.
start.
Okay. So do we go back after that again sometime?
So we've talked about that, we're gonna have to go back out for our 18 mil renewal.
Okay,
That, I think that expires in 2024. 2024, 2025. So we'll have to go back out for that. And so the initial thinking that we had was to bundle those two things together. and see what kind of traction we could get with that kind of packaging.
The tax year 2024, December 24, it expires.
So that's something we'd look at doing in 2023, either May or in November, and we'll just, monitor the climate and see how things are going in the economy.
And then I had one other question about a lot of these debt funds that we went out and refinance, basically, refunding, is that what we call
Yeah.
that? I don't want to waste your time, but could you find out how many dollars we may have saved by going down to 3% from where we were with a lot of that stuff at 6 and 7%? Again, if it's a lot of work, I don't want to know.
Yeah. I want to say that we have that,
You have someone.
we have that somewhere.
I'd just like to make that public when we get a chance, like when we refunded those. From, again, a higher percent to a lower, I don't recall the exact numbers, how many dollars we've saved. And now we're in a situation where things have flipped again.
Correct, yeah.
Rates are higher, so we're saving money again, so to speak, by not having to pay higher rates because we locked in at those lower rates. That's pretty cool stuff. Says me.
Yeah, I think we saved somewhere in the vicinity of $600,000 when Jeff Malik did the
Right.
first refinance and then refunding, and then maybe it was somewhere 320
Okay, you kind of remember.
when Chris did
Right.
we did the second refund.
Okay,
refund.
good.
I can look that up as well.
All right, last fund. We're almost through slide deck 1.
Yeah, of this presentation.
I started to tear up over here.
Final one, the 2021 bond construction fund. So this is the series 1. So obviously significant progress has been made. We've completed the work at Cedar Trails and middle school. The work at the addition at the high school, remodel at Red Hawk and Cedar View will be complete for the start of the next school year. And then we are meeting next week to start planning the beach renovations, which will be say renovations, but a major overhaul. So for projected revenues, we're actually a slight decrease in what we're earning for interest, down to down by about $10,000. We actually did expend a little bit less than what we originally projected based on the drawdown schedule. So to date, we're at 13 million projected out through June. So obviously we're running it, and this is really hard to read, but about a deficit of $13.3 million. This is bring the money in one time and then you spend it. So we recognized the revenue last year when we issued the bonds. So we currently have a fund balance, projected fund balance of $16.7 million in this fund. So we will need to take action. You will need to take action at the next board meeting to formally approve the budget amendment. Any changes that do take place, I will obviously let you know. For example, if we end up shifting, after I talk to Chris, if we move that furniture from compensatory up to basic needs, I would present that to you.
Kind of general question, are you thinking the auditor scheduled them early this year? Last year we were early, what are you?
I have them for, I want to say the week of Labor Day. I want to say is when I'd have to pull it up. So we're a little bit later than I think they used to do it in mid-August, which is pretty early.
more bond things to look at.
All right, moving on to the initial budgets for 22-23. So this is part of the budget hearing that is required under the truth and taxation laws. And part of that is also covering the L429 and millages the mills that we're levying. But this is part of that whole process. So this is just the kind of resolution language. Be it further resolved that the total revenues and unappropriated fund balance estimate to be available for appropriation in the general fund of the school district for the fiscal year 2022, 2023, which includes 17.34 or 17.4373 mil of ad valorem taxes to be levied on non-homestead and non-qualified agricultural property to be used for operating purposes only. All right, so projected enrollment is kind of where we always start. Two pieces, you start with the budget enrollment and state aid revenue, making those assumptions. So right now I am projecting a state aid membership decrease of 50 pupils next year. And that is based off of the February count that we had, as well as I think we'll add a few students back that were kind of a technicality that we lost. Also notice, we had 24 RITS students in our pupil count. We're losing all 24 because that program is moving to the ISD. So part of that 50 down is directly attributable to that program moving to the ISD. So then we have our projected enrollment for the October account. As we discussed earlier, we're back to the traditional 90-10 rate allocation. So that calculates out to a projected enrollment or pupil membership account of 3,278. One thing we need to keep a close eye on is the live birth rates within the county. So if you look at that chart, there's a pretty significant drop from 18 to 19. So currently, children born in 2017 are enrolling in kindergarten now. They'll enroll this year and next year. So we have 2 years before we feel that impact of that drop, which is 437. Obviously, we're hoping that more families will be moving into the district. But it's just something to keep an eye on. There's a lot fewer children in the county to go to school. So I think in the past, there's quite a few slides on the CREC, the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference. I did cut it down quite a bit. But basically, this is the conference where the executive branch, the House and Senate fiscal agents all get together, review their previous estimates, where they are now and where they think they'll end the state's fiscal year. They use that then to project next fiscal year's revenues and create the upcoming budget. So a couple key input. So they invite economists from U of M and throughout the nation to present. A couple key inputs that those economists are discussing, what they're considering: inflation expectations, monetary policy, fiscal policy, the price of oil, home pricing. All those variables go into them forecasting what the upcoming revenues will be. So obviously, right now is pretty volatile times. One of the slides that they presented was on the West Texas index on oil, and they had showed a chart that had the 3-month average for the price of crude oil at the West Texas index, and they projected it would go as high as $100 a barrel. Well, as of last week, when I checked, we were 120. So there's a lot of unknowns. And obviously, that's not a 3-month quarterly period, but we'll see if we get to that being a quarterly figure. So there's a lot of unknowns that have been put into these numbers, and they admitted that much as that we might be kind of being somewhat conservative. It might go better, but it also might go worse. So we're kind of going right down the middle. So key takeaways, right now, the state aid fund revenues continue to exceed the expectations from the previous CRAC. And even since the May 20th CRAC, state aid or state aid fund revenues have even exceeded what they were projecting back 20 days ago. The balance sheet is very healthy. Essentially, there is money to be invested in schools, both one-time spending and continued funding. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of unknowns of what the future holds, and will that revenue be sustained? And then also it's election year, so a lot of posturing on both sides of the aisle. So there's a lot of assumptions built into this budget. And we're, I guess, ultimately going.
I think you described this last time when that's kind of how this process works. They haven't decided how much it's all
Correct.
assumptions.
It is,
Yes.
based on the best information we have today. So the budget that I built is pretty much following very closely to the governor's budget that was proposed, which would include a $435 increase per pupil foundation allowance. She pretty much across categoricals did 5% increases at the time to stay up to speed with inflation. So it's actually a little bit lower than inflation now. But those are the assumptions I built into this budget, staying very close to what the governor proposed, which if that came to play out would be a very favorable budget to school districts.
Yeah, we'd be in trouble if we were not getting additional revenue because our enrollment is decreasing. So, Marty showed the one chart that showed our trajectory of enrollment increase. When the pandemic hit, that number dropped significantly. So, really, not only did we not gain that 75 to 100 students per year, we were actually going in the opposite direction. So, the pre-pandemic trajectory would have had us closer to 3,700 students right now, compared to our actual, which is closer to 33 and change. So we're going to really watch enrollment carefully, and it will result, if we don't turn that around and get that positive trajectory going again, then we'll have to really examine, our expenses and do some belt tightening realistically, because we just can't, that annual revenue from the state is just not guaranteed. So we have to be careful.
All right, so revenue projections. Currently projecting revenues to be up $1.1 million. Of the local revenue, I'm projecting to be actually down $152,000. large part of that being, again, we're not anticipating having any large losses to our building. Fingers crossed, but you know, this storm will go north of us today. We won't have any losses. Property taxes, I'm projecting to increase 10%. And we'll talk about the hefty rollback later, but we did have a large addition of taxable properties this year to the 2022 tax year, $12.8 million. So that's the large driver of that 10% increase. State aid revenue projecting to be up about $1.1 million, 1.2 of those related to that increase, that $435 per pupil increase. Also increased to section 31A of $450,000. Again, I mentioned we're deferring some revenue from the 21-22 into 22-23, as well as a 5% increase. That's what makes that up. We have a $365,000 reduction to the ESSER2 equalization grant that we received from the state. We fully expended that this year, so that money is going away. And then collectively a reduction of about $200,000 to our other capital inputs. Federal revenue, I project to be up about $100,000. Increases to Title I and II again. Some of those funds being deferred from this year to next. A pretty large reduction to Section 23B, but when I do the final amendment in June of next year, that number won't be as large because we haven't planned, summer school for next year yet. So we still have some funds available there to use. And then large increases to ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 expenditures that we will be expending. And then transfers and others will be up about $112,000. A slight decrease to special ed tuition reimbursements. We will be going back to normal levels for special ed transportation payments to the ISD, and then some increases to our Act 18 revenue and the enhancement millage that we receive through the ISD. All right, on to the expenditures. Projecting a $553,000 increase year over year currently. So some assumptions that we built into the expense side of it. So the CSEA agreement currently in place expires June 30th, 2024. So we are going on to year 2 of that agreement. That agreement has step plus a 2.5% increase to base. Currently negotiating with the IUOE support staff. That agreement expired in June of last year, and we're currently operating under a letter of agreement. So we're closing in on a tentative agreement. So I've kind of built some of those assumptions into the budget. And then for non-union staff, which would be the admin, district office staff, and our district hourly individuals, for salaried individuals, I've kind of mirrored what the CSEA is receiving, 2.5% to their base and plus their step if they have a step. And then for the hourly rates are in line with what I'm projecting the support staff union receive. And then just non-personnel costs, I've got inflation factored in throughout our other non-personnel expense categories.
So what's your inflation prediction?
For the most part, at least a 5% increase. Energy, 20 to 25% increase
From here or from today?
from today. From what our ending expenditures at June 30th of this year, 25% of that.
Okay,
Add.
right,
I hope I'm being aggressive.
right.
So that's utilities and fuel.
It's a big number.
Staffing changes. We've had 10 retirements, 10 resignations, 6 reassignments, 6.25 positions eliminated related to the RITs. And then 4 temp and 1-year contracts expired. In turn, we added 5.2 new positions, filled 2 previously unfilled positions, and then had 29 replacements. So the net is 0 change. Now, as we continue to plan for next year, that might change. So again, moving on to the budget categories, basic programming is again, the lion's share of where we spend our funds. So I'm projecting a slight increase to basic programming, 3.9% increase to certified staff wages. Going along with that is the subsequent increase to retirement, FICA, workers' comp. There's a 1.3% increase to the medical insurance hard cap that is factored in. Taking out the part of the decrease would be $111,000 decrease to new curriculum. That would be that is the reading curriculum that we purchased last year. $265,000 decrease to summer school, and then an increase. We are purchasing additional classroom furniture using ESSER funds this year. Added needs, I have a decrease of $61,000. Special ed is up. Of some of those positions, we're adding an ASD resource room and MySci positions. We have a net decrease related to the RITS program moving to Kent ISD. So we're losing the staff, the personnel costs, and we also have to rent a van for it. But then offsetting that, we will be paying some tuition to the ISD if we have students that are enrolled in that program. And then just some general increases to staff wages and benefits. Compensatory education, I have a decrease of $157,000, primarily related to that furniture that was purchased in ESSER funds. Pupil support, I have an increase of $143,000. One of those unfilled positions was the high school counselor position. So we filled that, and then just the general increases to wages and benefits. Instructional staff services decreased almost $400,000. We had one retirement that was being charged there, and her replacement is actually being moved to school administration, so the principal, office of principal. We're also adding a intervention and instructional specialist. Last year we had $47,000 of ESSER 2 employee trainings that I have not budgeted for, so that's a subtract, a decrease. This is where the K-12 math curriculum was charged, so we don't have that on the budget this year. Then we're also adding, the last two adds would be the Director of Post-Secondary Success position falls under this category. And then it's the general staff wages and benefit increase. And Jen and I will be talking further throughout the summer about what additional curriculum needs does the district have that we can address this year while we still have the ESSER funds and while the housing fund balance is healthy. So this, I would anticipate going up, but that has not been factored into these numbers. So general administration, slight increase, school administration, an increase of 89,000, business services, a decrease of 61,000. So contributing to those changes would be the assumption of increases to match the CSEA wage increases. We have 7 new building administrators, so principals and assistant principals that actually they're coming in at the start of the scale versus being at the top of the scale. So that is a personnel cost saving that's factored in. Natalie, the district accountant, is retiring effective 12/31 of this year. So she's essentially a 0.5 on the budgets. And then those duties will be absorbed by the district / payroll position. So Matt Andres is picking up some additional duties. Operations and maintenance, $228,000 increase. Again, wage increase. There was a significant decrease related to the roofing repairs that we incurred. This is the $276,000 increase related to utilities. That's the 25% due to inflation. And then property and liability insurance is going up by $45,000. Primary drivers, cybersecurity, and replacement cost. If we have a loss now, it's going to cost a whole lot more to repair it than it did 3 years ago. So that those are driving up rates. Transportation had going up $294,000, 108 being an increase to transportation, which we'll discuss their proposed contract for the next 5 years. But part of that is an increase in their per diem daily rate, as well as, that's projected on having 176 school days versus the 166 that we incurred. So it's a combination of those two. $87,000 for additional diesel fuel, and then $130,000 for special ed transportation payments to the ISD. Final two, essential support services. Have those increasing $226,000, $40,000 being going from an interim HR director to the full-time HR director. $276,000 related to the ISD being, the IT department now being full-time Cedar employees, but we're reducing our payments to the ISD by $168,000. And then we're adding a part-time central office secretary to sit up at the front and do various duties for the central office team. And then athletics is a slight increase related to the base increasing on that schedule. So here's just a real quick rundown of our COVID-related funding that we have budgeted. We have $2.3 million currently allocated for the upcoming school year. That leaves us a balance of just under $1 million to spend in the 23-24 school year. And after the 23-24 school year, COVID-related funds are gone. This allocation is pretty much the same. Expenditure categories would be the same that we discussed earlier: salary and benefits, furniture, Chromebooks, potentially curriculum.
So the ESSER, there was a time frame that had to be spent. ESSER 2 is gone, come and gone, or we still can spend ESSER 2?
We still have ESSER 2.
And then ESSER 3 expires, do you know when?
9/30, they all expire 9/30/2024.
We pushed them all from Sunday. Okay.
So these graphs just show real quick kind of where, the breakdown of where we're spending money. Again, the lion's share of what we're spending funds are salary and personnel. So right now, as the budget is built, I show the district adding an additional $1.1 million to fund balance. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there likely will be some additional expenditures that we incur as we continue on our planning for next fiscal year, or the next school year, that aren't necessarily incorporated into this budget at this time. But as it is built right now, we're adding $1.15 million to fund balance. A large portion of that being we're spending those ESSER dollars and offsetting some of the general fund expenditures that we have. So that would bring us up to 28.49% fund balance. That is a very healthy fund balance. Any questions on the general fund? All right, let's move on to our other funds. Again, community service. So currently, as I mentioned earlier, preschool is exceeding the pre-pandemic levels. I am projecting campus kids to start closing that gap, getting closer and closer to being back to pre-pandemic. So that's assumed in this budget. We do anticipate receiving a second round of that child care relief grant to the tune of $148,000. Salary assumptions are based on the current ongoing negotiations with the support staff union. So right now I'm projecting revenues in excess of expenditures of $55,869. That would bring our total fund balance to $225,000, which is a 46% fund balance. All right, the food service budget. This was a much more challenging than I originally anticipated, due to all those unknowns that are currently exist. One being, we don't know what the reimbursement rates will be. We don't know how much the federal government will pay us for free meals, for reduced meals, and you get a small amount for even the fully paid meals. So we don't know what that is. We also don't know, so participation, number of meals served when it's free, or when it was all free, jumped exponentially. We don't know what the impact will be if it's no longer free. I'm projecting it will go back closer to pre-pandemic levels, not all the way down, but a pretty significant reduction. I do think that reimbursement rates, they're not gonna go all the way back to what it was back in March of 2020. So I've added a little bit. The other wild card is, in the past, if you qualified for free and reduced lunch, you had to fill out a free and reduced form. Well, because that requirement went away when it was universal. So families haven't been filling that out. So we have to get families back into that habit of, not habit, but we need to get them back into that practice that you need to fill this out. It's very important, not only for you, but for the district, because a lot of the additional title funding and state, federal funding that we receive is driven off of your free and reduced population. The part of what I factored in here is for that first month or two, our free and reduced numbers will be lower than what they were in March of 2020. But once we're able to get that word out, and they really start realizing that, no, we do need to do this, the hope is that number starts to go back. Well, I guess the hope would be the number is always low. That would be the ideal situation, but we're hoping that the families that do need that support will fill out those applications and will receive those services. So with all that said, I'm currently projecting a decrease in revenue of $673,000. Also, part of the assumption is cost of supplies is going up due to inflation, but offsetting that is the fact that I'm predicting that we'll serve fewer meals. So I have expenditures decreasing $413,000. Right now, we're pretty close to breaking even based on but running a slight deficit. Right now, I have expenditures exceeding revenues by $8,739, bringing our fund balance down slightly to $736,000. Again, we are on if this came to play out as I've projected, we would have to spend some of that excess fund balance to be in compliance with the USDA excess fund balance requirements.
So my concern is that time where, because now everything's free, and you said it, we're gonna have a lag period before we get everybody signed up. Can we make a special communication effort at open houses or?
Yes,
Because people they're gonna be confused.
yes, and I know this is 100% on Holly's radar, and I'm pretty sure she's already probably been encouraging families to continue to fill out the application, but now it's not just encouraging, it's if you don't, you will not qualify, right? So now it's just, I'm asking someone to do me a favor, please do it, it's very important. Whereas, no, now please do it, it's very important, and it impacts you and your children if you don't. So hopefully, yes, there will be
That's gonna be a tough term.
a communication strategy to encourage people to sign up or fill out that application.
And we'll work with Amy on their newsletters and communication with families.
And just to be clear, that's July of next year. That's not December of this year.
Yes, the universal free meals expires at the end of this month.
The end of this month. So it's before we come back to school. So we need to move very quickly. That's right.
Yeah, and we thought about that just in terms of being strategic. When's the optimal time to get communication in the hands of parents so that they take action? And so it's gonna have to be a multiple,
The lunch boxes are on my for back to school.
yeah.
Well, and to your point, I think we probably should be prepared to spend some of this fund balance to take care of these students who didn't get paperwork. I don't think that we should turn anybody away as we go out in the fall. Just my thought, I'm not talking for the board. Just because they didn't get a piece of paper turned in, whether it's our fault or the parents' fault. So, yeah, you gotta be a strategy there for all that too.
I would think starting to communicate earlier, the better, just because so many other expenses are going up right now, so even just for families to be able to budget, I know optimal timing, might be not even be on a lot of families' radar yet. 'Cause school is out, but I think we should do due diligence to get communication out so they can prepare.
And I would ask you about your projected fund balance on food service. You've just carried over last year's fund balance as your beginning balance for 2023. But aren't we going to be spending that down by law before we get to the end of the 2023 budget year?
No, we will not be spending down the excess by the end of this year. It will carry into, it'll be there July 1st, 2022. And then and we can be proactive and start spending it down now.
Okay.
Well, effectively July 1. And then in February, March, the state will send us a notice that you have excess fund balance, please spend it down. Then we have to submit a plan of use for those funds. We can be strategic and spend it now, but as long as it's allowable, and then submit that plan of use at that time, or you can also request an extension into the following.
Okay, so there's more options than just spend it.
Yes, you can be strategic.
Thank you.
So as I say, if we know for sure, because you were going to get an answer on whether that fund balance could be used on lunches or not. So if we have that at our next meeting, we could talk about then, maybe if we add that as an agenda item for next meeting, to talk about, what that transition period might look like as we start the next year. And then maybe we could discuss that as a board for the first couple of months to be a safety net for those folks that maybe don't have that paperwork in.
And we'll work on some strategies with Holly, because I know there are some, you want to provide supports for people who need the supports. Because the pot is limited, we want to be able to stretch that provision as far as we can. Some people take free things just because they're free, so we want to be strategic.
Yeah, and my understanding is previous to the pandemic, the district covered the difference between reduced and free. So if you qualified for free or reduced, it was free. That was my understanding.
I just want to say, I understand like wanting to stretch it, but I would rather give out 10 free lunches to people who don't need them if I'm making sure I'm getting that one kid who does need it. I would hate for us to be so careful that any one child goes without or is stigmatized but we can talk about that for later.
Yeah.
I'm
We're on the
pretty
same page.
passionate about it. I know.
We really are. We want to take care of the whole child.
Mhm.
They're not going to learn if they can't, if they're hungry.
Mhm.
All right, moving on is the student activity fund. This one's always hard to predict or forecast. So generally, take the prior year and kind of roll it into same level of activities for the upcoming year. So right now, based on where we ended last year, I'm proposing a budget of $265,000 in revenue, about $260,000 of expenditures. So that would add $5,000 to our fund balance, bringing it up to $234,000. again, a very healthy fund balance that's in line with the district fund size. All right, here's the debt funds. As I mentioned earlier, we're dropping the 2016 B refunding, but we will be adding well, and it's not on here because we haven't done it yet, but I project issuing the Series 2, so then we would create a 2023 bonds debt service fund. But because it hasn't happened yet, it's not part of this. That fund doesn't exist yet, but I anticipate it will. So these budgets are based on the annually we work with Baker Tilly, our finance advisor, to do debt service levy calcs. They project the debt service revenue, tax revenue based on levying 7 mills and then allocated out to our different debt service funds. So that's what these budgets are based off of, that debt service levy projections that Baker Tilly has provided. It includes, so currently it has us in repayment mode to the school bond loan fund. But as I mentioned earlier, once we issue the 2023 Series 2 bond, that will put us back into repayment or borrowing mode. So as of now, for the 2012 refunding bonds, I have us adding $78,000 to fund balance, bringing that up to $104,000 at June 30th, 2023. For the 2016A refunding, we're showing an addition of $21,500, bringing our year-end fund balance to $25,574. For 2017, we'll be adding just shy of $25,000 to the fund balance, bringing our total to $30,253. For our 2018 refund, an addition of just shy of $69,000, bringing us to $78,174 or $147. $2019 refunding, an addition of $31,665, bringing our total fund balance to $34,706. $2021 refund, an addition of $10,928, giving us an ending fund balance of $13,586. All right, last one, last debt service. Project an addition of $58,714, bringing our year-end fund balance to $78,132. All right, so last two funds, the capital projects funds, the sinking fund and the school building and site. So as I mentioned earlier, summer of 2021 tax levy was the last year to collect the sinking fund revenues. So right now, the only revenue that we would have in this fund would be interest earnings. We're projecting potentially using $308,000, but really Russell, Vic, and I will be sitting down and doing the planning for how to best spend those funds. And we'll be using those funds in conjunction with the bond funds that we have available. So currently, obviously we don't have we'll only have $2,500 of revenue. If we spend 300,000, we'll be running in a deficit, which would bring our remaining fund balance to $1.6 million. All right, final one. The 2021 school bond, school building and site construction bond. Right now, our only revenue, again, is investment income, which I'm projecting at 20,000. The expenditures are based on the most recent construction draw schedule. So this $16.7 million currently would not get us through the draw schedule as it is presented. But for budgeting purposes, we're basically spending all the funds that we have available in this fund. Hence, we will have to go out and issue the Series 2 construction funds in 2023. We'll work with Baker Tilly on that, with not PFM, but Troon and our various advisors when the time comes to issue those bonds. All right, last slide. Again, we'll have to take action. You will have to take action on the June 27th board meeting to adopt this budget.
Thank you. Any wind-up thoughts from the board?
I would just comment briefly that I appreciate Scott's thought process about the increase in revenue is nice now, but the pupil count going this way is not good. I'm also noticing expenses are going this way with the revenue. So you take those lines and look at them. One of these things is not like the other. So we have to be ready to tighten our belt on a moment's notice, really. I mean, it's tricky.
We'll know more after fall count.
Sure, right.
You know,
Yeah,
that'll-
we count.
And really, it's not just a one-time event. We need to get back on a track where we're showing positive. growth.
Right, and you look at the evidence he showed with the Kent County births. We hope people move to Cedar Springs School District, but based on that number, there's less people to move here.
Yeah, live birth won't be getting it done. It'll be
Correct.
families that are moving this way from other areas.
Appreciate you keeping an eye on
Or adoption.
And I have looked at our staffing. I want to say 30 plus certified staff that within the next 5 years can retire. So we will have some,
built-in options.
built-in options. Like I showed you earlier, essentially our headcount was net zero. Well, in the future, we don't replace some of those retirements. if need be. So there's some options for some salary savings there.
Thank you. Lots of numbers, but it lets you know what's going on in the district and everything. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So let's get on with this.
Jumped in with both feet.
Yes.
Get here at budget time.
No. So I'm next.
Okay, does the board need a break or did you want to charge right on? Okay. All right, you are next, and that brings us to the Dean Transportation Contract Renewal.
All right. So their current proposal, the meat and potatoes of the agreement essentially are staying the same. The one tweak they made to the language is they're maintaining that, they're proposing to maintain the 40% discount for school closures. But they've added a new category for closure called extended closures, which would be a 45% discount. That's kind of addressing the what we went through when all the districts were closed for the pandemic. That's basically all the Dean districts agreed to do a 45% discount at that time. So that's just putting that, what was a letter of understanding into the contract. And again, Scott touched on that, I think, back in May, but really the purpose of that 40% discount is, they need to continue to maintain their drivers, because if they lay off all their drivers and then school, it's time to reopen school, and all the drivers have went and found other jobs, we are in a world of hurt. So, operationally. So their current proposal is to increase the daily per diem rate by 3.84% from the contract ending now to year one, and then subsequent to that, a 2.9% increase. Previously, it was a 2.75 annual increase that we experienced. So, they're recognizing the fact that costs are going up, salary and benefits are going up as well. So the projected costs on this is based on currently our average daily, or our daily rate to operate is $10,878 per day. That's 25 bus runs that they operate. At a minimum, we pay for 4 hours for a bus each day, and the minimum rate is the $345. Then there's a variable rate, so every hour past that 4 hours, we pay a little additional amount. So that variable rate is also they're increasing that amount annually as well. So based on the current proposal, the increase would from 22 to 23 to 23-24 would be just over $100,000 increase. That captures that first big increase, and then from year 2 to year 3, through the remainder of the contract would be about a $60,000 increase annually to the operating costs if we maintain that 25 routes. They did mention potentially increasing to 27. I need to pick his brain on and I'm going to push back on that, given I'm not going to add routes. What was the rationale for adding routes when we're losing students? So that's where their current proposal stands.
And they can't get drivers. Or, so,
Yes.
I agree.
Was it 25 routes pre-pandemic also, do you know?
I have to look at that. I do know, I'll have to get back to you on that.
I just was curious. So, I mean, along your same line of thinking, if it was 25 routes pre-pandemic, then you're really down 300 students, not just the last year's number of students. So just to go along with your thinking, that makes sense to me. You have that conversation.
So I'll be following up with Dean this week and present something to you for action on the 27th. Get that contract squared away.
Any other questions on that? Moving forward to L4029 property tax levy. Monty's still on that.
I'm almost done. So this one will go fast. All right, so I think both Jeff and Chris, you have annually presented on the heavily amendment, but essentially it requires local units of governments to reduce the millages when annual growth on existing property is greater than the rate of inflation. So key is existing, right? So in yellow here is the formula that is used to calculate the heavily rollback. By holding this budget hearing and this truth and taxation meeting, it allows us to use the consumer price index as part of that rollback calculation. Without it, we would lose this. It would just be this. And we'll show you the impact. Right here is if we don't hold that truth in taxation, you'll notice that CIP has dropped off. So our current calculation, this is the 2021 taxable value. You'll see a significant, our 2022 taxable value increased 20 million. But of that 20 million increase, 12.8 million is new property that we're assessing. So our rollback factor calculates out to be 97.97.9787. What our factor ends up being. Because the increase in our taxable value has exceeded the rate of inflation. We have to roll it back. So this slide just shows you what our projected revenue would be on our non-principal residency and commercial properties if we did not have to roll back. So if we were collecting the full 18 mills and the full 6, our projected tax revenues would be $3,052,959. Because we're holding this truth in taxation hearing, we will be able to levy $2,953,878. So the difference between those two, because of the rollback, is $99,000. But if we don't do this truth in taxation hearing, we would lose an additional $98,000. So here's just a real quick proposed draft of the 2022 tax rate request, the L4029. We are proposed operating mills of 17.4373. This does not impact our debt levy, so we will continue to levy the full 7%. And you will notice that this year we do not have the sinking fund. And this is the Nuevo L4029. So I'm asking you to take action on the L4029 tonight so that Heidi and Tracy can sign it, and I can get those submitted to the township treasurers and the city treasurer tomorrow. They've already been provided drafts of the L4029 so that they can have their tax rolls prepared and out for the July 1st tax levy.
Pretty straightforward. You follow it to Texas. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a lot.
Oh, thank you.
No strikeouts. You wrote
Yeah.
back the whole time. Home run. There you go.
All right, you're go get quenched.
And Marty will run through this material again on the 27th prior to your adoption of the budget.
Maybe the brief review of it.
I'm gonna be sick that day.
I thought it was great. Nice job.
I told Scott, this is like the Super Bowl for school finance, and he,
Yeah, right.
it's like, that's a big stretch. I said, all right, maybe the Pro Bowl.
You had it laid out very well. I feel like it's very easy to follow. The notes are helpful.
I like the design of the notebook. And
I have to give Chris credit for the design.
No, you don't, just say you did it.
Okay, that brings us to discussion item G, superintendent evaluation.
So I've provided an array of artifacts for you to use in the determination of my effectiveness for the 2021-2022 school year. I did a self-reflection, which is from the MASB superintendent evaluation tool. I provided you summaries of each of the 5 sections of that tool with justification and rationale behind where I placed myself on the self-assessment. I also provided some artifacts for you to review. One is our 2021-2022 PD plan, which is actually an artifact that Jen and Stacy developed, and then we helped implement that over the course of the year. I attached a copy of just my calendar so you can get a sense of some of the different meetings and things that I participated in over the year. I included a download of our MGM, of our collection of administrative meeting agenda items, so you can get a sense of what we're talking about and what we're reviewing as an admin team. And then lastly, I included a copy of our running central office huddle notes. We meet every Monday morning at 8:30. And so that gives you just an accounting of what we have discussed and covered over the last 12 months. So no action for this evening, just provided those resources for you to do some reflection on, and just here to answer any questions.
Can you do a quick reading of all those office notes, those huddle notes for us?
I could do that. In like a,
There's like 278 pages.
Oh, I want, okay.
but the great thing about that is that's a living artifact.
Oh, yeah,
it's
it's fantastic.
It's so great. You can say,
Really
oh, we
big.
talk about that, and then you go jump into the search and it takes you right to that.
And
We have all of our links in those documents. It's really a vibrant tool
That's great.
to
when
help
you
us.
start reading
stay on
and you
track.
go on a link and then you fall into that hole, and then you go back and you read something else when you follow. You have to get comfortable in your chair.
It's
But it's
also
a-
like an extension of our brains, I feel like,
Yeah.
to remember what have we talked about.
Well, it is really cool though to look back and think, wow, we were talking about this in August, you know? And it just seems like so long ago that we were doing that work. You know, again, this evaluation, while it's an evaluation of me, as I've shared before, it's a reflection of the team. So it's not one person, it's this team, it's Vic, it's, you know, it's the group.
Is there any questions? We'll discuss when we make the motion next. It's pretty transparent, it's all there, no secrets. Okay. Thank you. Our last discussion item is the one that we added on there, a little technical glitch, and it's the end of year data for the 98E grant.
It's actually not a grant, it's for 98B legislation that came as a result of COVID, asking for transparency from schools in order to ensure that we were returning to school and having all students participate in regular benchmark assessment throughout the course of the year to track our progress. So there is no money associated with it, but it is an assurance that we make in order to get some of the CARES Act funding. So you can see a beginning, middle, and end of year array of data. In some cases, especially at the high school level, breaking down into demographic data is very difficult because there is not a high school benchmark assessment, since students don't stay in grade level courses as they do K through 8 more regularly. So you'll notice that the data looks really kind of funky when you get up to the end of the year at the high school level. And even as you look from beginning of year to middle of year to end of year, that's not super clean data because we have to run that based on not power school data, and it's not aligned with
other systems, so it's hand calculated in many cases. So just a couple of high level overviews. It looks like 4 areas did not meet the goal of having students grow from beginning of the year to end of the year. That could be a result of some of the COVID trends that we saw this year with students being ill or out. We are still dealing very much with, we're, not back to regular old, everybody's in school every day. So some of those data dips were small, but still not what we would hope to have seen. In 14 different grade spans and areas, students went up by double. They doubled their growth. So, for example, in 4th grade, in reading, they went from 25% being proficient at the beginning of the year. That's a quarter of our students proficient on end of year goals. So when you think about that, at the beginning of 4th grade, 1/4 of our students are already meeting the goals for the end of 4th grade. By the end of the year, more than double that, we're meeting those end goals based on I-ready. 24 areas overall out of the 28 that are there. So that feels pretty good in quite a strange 3 years in a row.
Any questions? It's on for action tonight, so we can meet the legislative requirements.
We did present on it at the last board meeting. We were in this room. You might remember I did a preview of it. So this is really kind of the second.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
All right, very good. With that, I'll entertain a motion. Next on our agenda, I'll entertain a motion to move into closed session pursuant to Open Meetings Act, Section HC regarding contract negotiations.
So moved.
Support.
Any discussion? Having none. Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed. Yes, we will commence to close session and return.
I may have to work it.
Yeah. All right, so let's let the record show that we're going back into open session at 9:29. And that brings us to public comments. And do I hear any takers for public comments in the room? We received no notification, so I'll close public comments. That brings us to action. And our first action item is as presented. I'll entertain a motion for as presented for the middle level handbook revisions.
So moved.
Support. Any discussion? Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde.
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed. Yes, motion carries. Second action item is L 4029 property tax levies. I would entertain a motion for as presented.
So moved.
Support.
Any discussion? Having none, Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde.
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed. Yes, motion carries. Last action item for this evening is the end of year data presentation for the 98B to meet legislative requirements. I'll entertain a motion for as presented.
So moved.
Support.
Secretary Slager,
Yes.
Treasurer Gilmore,
Yes.
Trustee Vanderhyde,
Yes.
Trustee Rivard,
Yes.
Trustee Bowser,
Yes.
President Reed. Yes, motion carries. And that brings us to communication with the board. I pretty much have told you everything I know. Sent you an email. There's nothing else. And do you have anything for us? Mr.
Principal
Smith?
search updates are going well. What do Tricia Shenfield, April Stevens, Holly Haywood, Courtney O'Brien, and Mike Duffy have in common? They're the only 4 members of the team who right now have the same job that they had a year ago.
Wow.
How crazy is that?
That's really crazy.
Okay,
Now, I mean,
You
my
still have the same job.
Stacy's an assistant, so, yep. Jen's- I mean, we've changed roles, people are still here, but that's like we were thinking, oh my. But it's okay, because we've got a system, it's an organization, it's not just one person. And we think of it like, I don't want to take it back to an athletic reference, but it's like a college team. You just keep reloading. It's like a Broadway musical. You get a new cast and you bring it. And so, yeah. So it was just kind of interesting. I kind of had that, oh, wow.
Like how you
When
Yeah.
put sports and musicals together.
I realized that, that was just a crazy, yeah. But we've never been stronger. Like, that's the cool thing.
We have planning. You have a
Yeah.
flight plan.
There you go.
Flight.
Yep.
So,
All right, thank you. All right, so planning, we know when our next meeting is, with the end of June. And Trey said there's a mean hook on this storm, so travel carefully and we'll stay adjourned at 9:33.